The plan was launched at a press conference in the Pentagon. It was July 1952, and a definitive moment in the history of spin.
This is Major General John A. Samford, Director of Intelligence, United States Air Force, who conducted the conference.
Samford's job was to deny there was anything significant about the reported sightings.
It does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate to any conceivable threat to the United States.
To argue the alien invader theory, they put a pulp magazine writer, retired Major Donald Kehoe, on the same platform as the Major.
Major Kehoe, as author of the book Flying Saucers Are Real, what is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin.
It was very clever and very simple. Now, anyone who saw a military saucer would be encouraged to believe they'd seen an alien.
It was about 40 feet long, and I think...
And the rest of us would laugh at them.
I saw it for so many minutes that I can't deny what I saw.
The press loved the alien story and ran it with enthusiasm. The very edition of Life magazine, which launched Marilyn Monroe as a star, also launched the career of many a monster from Mars.
In that article, a number of anonymous government and military experts were interviewed and made statements supporting the idea that the saucers could not be man-made objects, secret weapons, or misidentified natural phenomena. So the alternative seemed to be that they were from another planet. The first times that theory had been given major publicity.
Never before has the screen reached such heights of excitement, breathtaking spectacle.
Donald Kehoe's writings directly inspired the most classic saucer movie, Earth versus the Flying Saucers, made by legendary Hollywood animator Ray Harryhausen.
The basic concept was taken from one of his books about flying saucers. I understand that the government has made a lot of experiments with round flying objects, and which they kept quiet, and so they probably encouraged the idea that they were aliens from outer space.
Indeed, it appears the government was so interested that the film's producer, Charles Schneer, was reporting directly to them.
Of course, after the script is finished, it's out of my hands, and I'm sure that Charles submitted it to the front office as well as to various space people.
Oh, here they come. Oh, there they go.
But while American citizens looked to the skies with varying degrees of concern, the men in black were looking closer to home. They were desperate for their own saucers, and just like the Russians, they were looking for former Nazi scientists to help them.
When the Nazis surrendered in 1945, the U.S. military was worried about the German scientists falling into the hands of the Soviets, and the U.S. military was also interested in exploiting the knowledge of these scientists to help develop American programs like missiles and electronics, radar, supersonic aerodynamics, jet engines, and other advanced technologies that the Germans had developed. So the United States set up a program called Overcast and Paperclip to collect these scientists and bring them to the United States.
In some respects, the Americans did very well. They snatched Nazi technology boss Werner von Braun and made him into an invaluable member of the American war machine. They also acquired a great deal of German V-2 rocket technology. But while they played with these new toys with rather more enthusiasm than skill, they knew there was a serious gap in their new armory. They had no German saucers.
It seems that the Air Force was concerned that the Russians may be ahead of us and that we need to have our own, an answer to the Soviet saucers.
Then, one day in 1957, they had a stroke of luck. And once again, it involved the German saucerman Andreas Epp, now living in East Germany.
At some point, he had a falling out with life in Eastern Germany. I don't know what it was. It may have been a divorce. anyway, he ended up in the West, and he crossed the border then and said, "Hi, here I am. I was spying for the Soviets, and I want to tell you everything I know." And the Americans immediately threw him in jail and began interrogating him. And while he was in jail, he started writing and drawing from memory what he had done for the Soviets, the Soviet saucer plan, and what it was going to be used for.
With the help of Epp and others, America's saucer program began in earnest.
It's an interesting fact that by the late 50s and early 60s, almost all the major aerospace contractors, including Boeing, Convair, Lockheed, North American, were working on concepts for saucer-shaped vehicles for various applications.
This is Lockheed's California division, senior member of the Lockheed family, birthplace of an always exciting family of wings.
Lockheed was working on a number of saucer designs for the US Air Force.
They all have a central engine that would point downward, and the aircraft would take off straight up, transition into horizontal flight, accelerate to very high speed, and then fly at over 100,000 feet. And this was very advanced thinking for the time.
The Lockheed engineers were working on a saucer which used a central jet driving a rotor to create the Coanda or flying saucer effect. Once airborne, it redirected its jet to travel horizontally at supersonic speeds. But Lockheed wasn't the only US corporation working on this technology.
Convair was one of the other major aircraft companies in the 1950s and 60s.
Like Lockheed, Convair had both secret projects and a public face. In this case, Hollywood star James Stewart.
Well, that was quite a day I had there. Believe me, that's quite an airplane.
In the 50s and 60s, Bob Widmar was a senior designer for Convair and a key member of the team which built the B-58 Hustler. In the early 60s, it was the fastest plane on Earth.
Well, that really got me excited. After all, the bird flies Mach 2. Now, Mach 2, that's 2 times as fast as the speed of sound.
But Bob Widmar didn't just design jet aircraft. In the late 50s, he was given a stunning new brief to design an aircraft which was invisible. Invisible, at least, to radar.
You had to be able to be non-detectable 360 degrees, because even at that time, the Russian radars began being hooked up together. The only way that could really be solved is by coming up with a thing that was shaped like a disc, or a discus.
In other words, Bob had to build a flying saucer, because the military had realized that a flying saucer would make a perfect stealth craft. Conventional planes are detectable by radar because surfaces at right angles to a radar beam reflect back. A disc or flying saucer, on the other hand, sends back diffuse and confusing signals. The prospect of a radar-invisible aircraft had caused great excitement in military circles, and one day some shadowy figures called on Bob.
When they first came out, I didn't know who they were. They didn't tell me, "Hey, I'm coming in here from the CIA. Hey, look at my badge."
Oh, they made me a member of the club.
I didn't know that was the CIA that came. That shows you how goddamn secret that they were.
In fact, the CIA was being even more mysterious than usual, because they weren't just fighting America's enemies, they'd been fighting each other. A secret turf war with the US Air Force over who should run spy planes.
They cheat, they lie, they're crooks, they disguise. To meet with them, for example, I'd have to go to buildings that were half finished in Washington. Airline reservations were made with fake names. It was hard on me and my wife, as such, to live this thing, and the thing was a whole bunch of fake stuff. It was almost where you couldn't tell the realism for what was just the phony.
Bob reluctantly agreed to work on the project, the design of a radar-invisible, saucer-shaped object.
I never would want to do it again, to have to live under that kind of a climate. You couldn't talk to anybody except at certain places that they selected.
The project was so highly classified it was not supposed to exist, a condition of absolute deniability known as a black project.
There's all kinds of black. I'm talking about the extreme black. I have lived through the extreme black.
Bob's project has never been declassified, and the CIA removed all his records and designs. In 1961, the world was shown what its builders claimed was the first real flying saucer, invented by this man, John Frost.
Well, the U.S. Army are interested in a vehicle which could fly close to the ground, which couldn't be stopped by roadblocks or rivers, etc., and which could jump over hedges and trees.
There were, however, real problems with the Avro car, as Doug Garland, one of the wind tunnel engineers, remembers.
We tested the Avro car in the tunnel, but it was very unstable. You know, if you throw a plate or a hubcap on the ground, it will tend to roll around like this. And the Avro car had a tendency to do that.
In fact, when the Avro car was first revealed to the public, the whole project had actually already been abandoned. In truth, the Avro car was not a flying saucer at all. It was actually the world's first hovercraft. It was also the almost accidental byproduct of a very secret and far more ambitious project, a project which had everything to do with flying saucers.
Quick question, do you believe in flying saucers?
Not in the sense that people believe they come from Mars and places like that, no.
John Frost didn't believe in flying saucers from Mars, but he did believe in flying saucers because secretly he was building one. This film has never been seen by the public before. Made strictly for the eyes of security-cleared military personnel, it records the work of Avro's top-secret Special Projects team, led by John Frost.
The 6 Viper engine test assembly was built by Avro Aircraft Limited to develop a power plant for an airplane of circular plan form. It consists of a basic airframe of 6 sections, excluding the outer wing, operator's cab, air intake roofs, and the flying controls.
Frost was building a huge jet-powered supersonic flying saucer, codenamed Project Y2 or Weapons System 606A.
On completion, it is anticipated that a considerable advancement will have been made toward the advent of disc flight.
And it, too, utilized German saucer technology.
John Frost was aware of wartime research that the Germans had carried out in flying saucer developments that were possibly the basis of what he saw all across the world as the real flying saucers in the sky. And that almost came at a time when the CIA was funding some research into a design concept much like the flying saucer he had in mind.
The US military was excited by the vision that Frost presented. These original secret project specs for the saucer showed it could fly higher and faster than any craft or weapon system then available.
Air Force documents are ambiguous about what the purpose of the saucer was.
Samford's job was to deny there was anything significant about the reported sightings.
It does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States.
To argue the alien invader theory, they put a pulp magazine writer, retired Major Donald Kehoe, on the same platform as the Major.
Major Kehoe, as author of the book Flying Saucers Are Real, what is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe...
Laugh at them.
I saw it for so many minutes that I can't deny what I saw.
The press loved the alien story and ran it with enthusiasm. The very edition of Life magazine, which launched Marilyn Monroe as a star, also launched the career of many a monster from... The plan was launched at a press conference in the Pentagon. It was July 1952, and a definitive moment in the history of spin.
This is Major General John A. Samford, Director of Intelligence, United States Air Force, who conducted the conference.
That some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin.
It was very clever and very simple. Now, anyone who saw a military saucer would be encouraged to believe they'd seen an alien.
It was about 40 feet long, and I think...
And the rest of us would